Hi, this is Dan Kubisky with the international community of the SPJ. With me today is our good friend Eric Wishart, Vice President of the Foreign Correspondents Club and former editor-in-chief of AFP. Uh, Eric, we've asked you here today to talk about all the things going on in Hong Kong. I mean, there is just so much on press freedom issues. You have fake news legislation. You have a police chief that says he wants to act on fake news. You have RTHK withdrawing from the Human Rights Awards program at the FCC. You have RTHK rejecting the Hong Kong Journalism Association Award. And you have a television producer being arrested for using public documents in a journalistic enterprise. What's going on in what used to be my favorite city?
I mean, what has stunned everybody is the speed with which it's happening. I mean, there's something, not just one thing a day, there's 2 or 3 things a day. I mean, it's a full-scale assault. But it was clear after the national security law came in, they said that there were 3 areas, the sort of justice system, education, and the media, to quote Carrie Lam, were areas for improvement. And apparently the areas for improvement in the media are just attacking it and trying to silence critical voices. And in the past week to 10 days, Jimmy Lai, the owner, publisher of the Apple Daily, has now been jailed along with other democracy activists for 14 months in jail for attending a peaceful rally.
And he has several more charges still coming.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, and they're all in jail. Yeah. They're all in jail. Yeah, these are people, I know at least 6 people in jail in Hong Kong, okay? And they're for political activities, not violence, for political activities. There was an attack on the Epoch Times, which is a newspaper, I don't know if you're familiar with it in the States, which is closely associated with Falun Gong, the spiritual movement, which is obviously a religious movement, which is very anti-Beijing, as you know. And for the second time in 2 years, thugs went in with sledgehammers, walked in and smashed up the printing presses on CCTV and walked out, right? No arrests. And then, of course, yesterday we had the case of Choi, who was this award-winning journalist who investigated an attack on peaceful protesters in an MTR, a subway station in a part of Hong Kong called Yung Long in 2019. There'd been a long day of process, and suddenly in the evening, this big group of white-shirted thugs, bars and sticks, turned up and just attacked all these protesters. And there was a lot of criticism of the slow police response. The police have tried to spin it that it was a battle between equal sides, and Bao Choi and the rest of our RTHK team investigated this. And there were suspicious vehicles at the scene which had transported weapons to these guys. And she went in to find out who. She checked the license plates to see who owned the vehicles. They traced it to these local village things, which we have in Hong Kong. And in the old days, you could, if you were doing a license plate search, you could do sort of other reasons, which would be what journalists would tick. But that box is not there anymore. So she ticked a box that her purpose for the search was transport and traffic questions, something like that, which she thought was one way of getting around it, as an investigative reporter would do. And she was arrested, charged, and yesterday she was found guilty on 2 counts, which means she has a criminal record, and fined the equivalent of $1,000 for this. And strangely, the judge did admit that she had done some good reporting, but that didn't excuse what she did. The argument here is this is in the public interest, and the Hong Kong government is restricting access to information, and it was quite legitimate. And whether, you know, what she did not anything any other journalists have done. And as you just pointed out, that report has already won, I think, two awards. So and I think it embarrassed the police, it embarrassed the government. So there's obviously the subtext of why the prosecution, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I can go on. So I mean, that kind of brings us down to the question of RTHK. RTHK is a public broadcaster, just like you know, I think the equivalent would be the like VOA or Radio Free Asia, publicly financed, independent editorially. At least that's what we thought. But under the new regime in Hong Kong, I mean, including the chief executive Carrie Lam, RTHK has been under constant attack because it does these investigative reports. And earlier this year, they appointed a new director of broadcasting, a man called Patrick Lee, who's a career bureaucrat, hasn't worked 1 minute in his life as a journalist, but quite proudly calls himself the editor-in-chief. And one of the very first acts he did was to cancel any politically sensitive programming. They have quite on RTHK. I mean, there's been a handful of programs he's now cancelled. There's quite a well-known character, as you probably know, called Steve Vines, who's quite a part of the media scene in Hong Kong, who's quite outspoken, again, a critic of the government in Beijing, who had a regular slot on a Thursday morning commenting on a show called Morning Brew with Phil Whelan. His slot was just cancelled. Mike Chugani, who was a very well-known figure in Hong Kong media, had a show on Sunday night on the television. That's a political chat show and writes for the South China Morning Post. Just announced he's quitting. He's tired of trying to figure where the political red lines are. Okay, might leave Hong Kong. And coming back to RTHK under Patrick Lee, something I've never seen in, let me think, I don't want to give my age away, but almost 50 years in journalism, I've never seen a media withdraw from media awards. Mm-hmm. It's usually a celebration for your journalist. Patrick Lee, a couple of weeks ago, issued a statement saying that RTHK was reviewing its processes or something and wanted to withdraw from all media awards that it had entered, including, as you said, the Hong Kong Human Rights Press Awards, which is jointly organised by the Foreign Correspondents Club, the Hong Kong Journalists Association, and Amnesty International. And also the SOPA Awards, which is the Publishers Awards. And when they won this award this week, which was a local Hong Kong journalism award for this, they won an award this week, the Bao Choi, for her investigative reporting into this attack on the protesters. RTHK said they were not accepting the award. Instead of saying, great, well done, you know. And
so what does that mean? What do you think this all means to the situation?
I mean, I think the Human Rights Press Awards, they wrote to us and we wrote back saying the RTHK cannot withdraw these entries because the entries are done by individuals, not by RTHK. So, you know, so too late. And SOPA said that the judging processes begin. So even though RTHK has entered, you can't withdraw. So there's pushback. Okay. What does it mean? Does it mean that he's embarrassed that reporting that was critical of the police and critical of the government is being recognized in media awards? Maybe, you know, it's not up to me to figure out the motivations, but it's not normal behavior for the head of a news organization to deprive its journalists from winning awards for excellent reporting. And it's just part of this pattern. So yeah, and then we come to the question of the fake news issue with the, I mean, fake news, I mean, it's probably, you're sick of hearing about fake news in the United States. We've got some kids coming next door. I've got a kindergarten next door, so you might hear some little voices in the background. I mean, you're probably sick and tired of fake news because of Donald Trump and thought you'd had the last of it when he left the White House, but it's alive and well in communist China and in Hong Kong. I mean, the critical, the reporting about Xinjiang. They call it fake news. John Sudworth of the BBC's reports about Xinjiang. They called it fake news. Wang Yi, who's the foreign minister, at his final press conference at the National People's Congress quite recently, called the accusations of genocide fake news. So you hear fake news a lot in China. And in Hong Kong, it's been picked up. Carrie Lam, the chief executive, said that there was a lot of skepticism, which turned out to be fairly justified. And at the end of the year, when she announced that the first doses of vaccine that were buying for Hong Kong were the Sinovac, the Chinese made vaccine, there was a lot of questions. Was this political? You know, why not Pfizer? Why not the others? And she said it's malicious. These are malicious rumors and fake news. And so now the police chief, so then she said later that she envisaged bringing in fake news legislation. And now the police chief, Chris Tang, who's also quite new, said that he said a couple of things. He supports bringing in fake news legislation. And last week he said that journalists who publish fake news should be investigated and prosecuted. And the FCC, as we speak, we just sent a message last night, a letter to him last night signed by the President, Keith Richburg, asking him for clarification on this and pointing out, and I would recommend our viewers have a look at the link to the story I did quite recently for the Foreign Correspondents Club magazine about fake news laws around the world. I mean, they have almost universally been used to suppress press freedom and freedom of speech and critical reporting. So we wrote pointing that out and saying, how do you define fake news? Fake news is a term that is a generic term. It's been used against journalists. It's ill-defined. And so if you support a law, but how would you define that in a law? And also in the meantime, if you said you would prosecute, investigate journalists for spreading fake news, on what legal basis would you do it? So that's where we are on that. So that's just coming out today, actually. We'll be posting a statement today on that.
Okay, well, we'll have that. We will have that up on the on our newsletter when we put it out on Friday. Definitely, I'll be looking for that. So there's talk about fake news legislation. There's talk about people. I mean, has there been any legislative actions that have begun to actually take away some of the press freedom? I mean, aside from the national security law, have there been local Hong Kong actions that have caused problems, or have they all been relying on the national law and interpreting it their way?
One thing they're trying to restrict his access to like information about companies in the company register, like personal details about like the directors and stakeholders, things. So there's a definite tightening under Carrie Lam talks about stopping doxing. You know, there was doxing of police during the protests. They were taking their numbers, they were putting their family names, their family photos, their home addresses online, which is, of course, doxing is a terrible thing to do, and these people were obviously being threatened. But under the, this is often the case, you'll take one example and then expand it to other cases. And can I just have a look? I just want to see, we issued a statement, the FCC. You can probably edit this, but I can just read this out. This was on March the 31st, the Foreign Correspondents Club. Hong Kong urges the government to reconsider the proposed changes to the company's ordinance that will remove from public access certain identifying details of company directors. The FCC believes such changes will be harmful to press freedom and transparency in the cities. The company's registry is an important tool long used by journalists to improve accountability, expose its wrongdoing, and bring to light important matters of public concern. So, I mean, this is just this is a bit less you know, it's a bit more under the radar than the cases like Bao Choi or Jimmy Lai or the attack on the Epoch Times. But I mean, this is this insidious creeping restriction on access to information in Hong Kong.
But isn't that how you see a lot of these actions? They take place. It's just chipping away a little bit here and a little bit there, and hoping people won't notice it.
Yes. And of course, as I said, that's not going to grab the front page headlines. But if you ask any of the journalists from like Bloomberg or Reuters or whoever who are doing this kind of Wall Street Journal, who are doing this kind of reporting, we need access to this information. Mm-hmm. You know, this is basic. Another thing they did recently was restricting the information given for court cases. People up, I think, no longer giving their home addresses and some other details. I mean, just like basic court reporting. Mm-hmm. So there's a general tightening of access to information in Hong Kong, which was never easy to get at the best of times, you know.
Right.
So it's like so you've got your kind of headline stuff, the big picture. Let's scare people, you know. Let's deprive them of their media awards. Let's arrest Jimmy Lai. Let's charge Bao Choi for embarrassing reporting. And on the other hand, as you say, there's this chipping away at just the basic tools that journalists need to do their work. Yeah, it's bad, and it's difficult to keep up with. You know, I mean, I think the international media still has a lot of freedom in Hong Kong. You know, I mean, again, it's always the local journalists. I mean, it has, I mean, freedom. I mean, if you're depriving people of access to this information, the freedom is being restricted. I mean, obviously the freedom is visas, and that's not really cropped up. It'd be interesting to see if there are any cases come up of restrictions on visas.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, they'll say, I mean, oh, right. I mean, Reporters Without Borders came out this week with their report. And for reasons I didn't quite understand, Hong Kong has fallen from number 18 to number 80 right. In years in its index. And for some reason, despite what has happened in the past year, they maintained Hong Kong in the same position. I mean, I filled out their questionnaire. They sent it to me for how did I see press freedom in Hong Kong? And I said, my answers, it was pretty clear there's been an erosion. But despite that, they chose to keep Hong Kong at its present position. And but they were critical of the introduction of the national security law. They said that affected press freedom, and the government came back very angrily, basically saying journalists are not out with the law. You have to respect the law. There is press freedom in Hong Kong, but you have to respect the law. Well, if you write a law that restricts press freedom and then say, you know, you have to respect the law, what can you do? I mean, look at Bao Choi. I mean, we used to, you know, we talk about rule of law, and now it's rule by law. Right. You know, the biggest weapon that journalists, governments have against us is the laws, and they write the laws.
Right.
And in Hong Kong, there's no essentially no political opposition, so they can write any law they like.
Now, you know, I noticed that there were a handful of news organizations in the U.S. who did carry the Bao Choi story, but I hardly saw anything outside of the Hong Kong press about what's happening with RTHK. I mean, every now and then Voice of America will have something, but not much. It was only in the Hong Kong press that I saw the stories about the fake news legislation, including your article, obviously. Right. It seems that the rest of the world is focusing on Jimmy Lai and Martin Lee.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, the world is focusing on Jimmy Lai, Martin Lee, the names that we've known for decades. As you say, these are the big scare headlines, but there's a lot going on. And I'm really glad you were able to spend some time and talk about some of these smaller things that are going on there. Yeah. Is there anything else that we're missing outside of Hong Kong that you think we should know about?
in Hong Kong. Let me think. Sorry about the screaming. Oh gosh, there was a good piece actually by in the New York Times yesterday, actually, about the overall situation in Hong Kong. I was reading through it. Just this, I mean, the chilling effect of people speaking in public platforms, sources not wanting to talk to you anymore. There's that. I mean, this is an invisible thing. I mean, how do you put a headline? How do you write a headline on the fact that sources have dried up? You know, people are very nervous about talking to the media. I mean, it has had a chilling effect. You have the chilling effect of a Michael Chugani just giving up, and others giving up. You know, how many people, I mean, you have the FCC, you have the Hong Kong Journalists Association. I think if you're an international journalist, there is an international journalist community that works together. I think it's one thing, but I think if you're an isolated journalist and you've got a bit of a profile and you're coming under threats, maybe your family, you're a local. So, you know, what else is going on? I think a lot, there is self-censorship, you know, the self-censorship and, oh, right. And I mean, one thing I didn't say was pro-government, pro-establishment, at least one or two, I think, newspapers came out this week saying that the Apple Daily should be closed down.
I saw, yes, that's right. I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much, Dan, it's difficult to get it all in, you know. They should shut down the Apple Daily. And so it's not very subtle, that. And the question is, you know, it's incremental. When are they going to start going after foreign media? And I mean, a big thing is foreign collusion, as you know, under the NSL. There's constant talk about patriotism and the narrative now of the protests, because as Bob Dylan once said, you can't change the present or the future, you can only change the past. So they're changing the past. So I noticed the Hong Kong government press statement recently describing the 2019 protests as a pro-independence movement supported by foreign forces. I mean, that's the narrative, and chaos. And of course, last week we had our first National Security Education Day when the Hong Kong police were goose-stepping. And this was the thing that really infuriated the police chief, because they had school children doing with
the toy guns. Yes, they're going through the routine.
Yeah, and they had that kind of
and Apple Daily put that next to a picture from the riots of 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they had the kids playing with these toy guns, and they were in a mock-up of a subway car, an MTR car, and the kids are like this, and there's a little kid going down like that. And the Apple Daily juxtaposed that with a very similar picture from the protest when it's the actual police. And that infuriated the police chief. I mean, on an ethical front, I would question the ethics of using children in that context. I mean, they weren't pixelated, so there was a journalistic ethical question over that. I mean, depictions of children is an ethical question. However, it was not fake news.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was fake news. It was not fake news. You know,
right.
Maybe, you know, I mean, there were other words if he didn't like it to describe it, and then you could have that discussion. But I mean, also, I mean, juxtaposing photographs is just bread and butter for photo editors. I mean, they do it all the time.
Right.
You know, unless you manipulated the images, you know, if they'd taken kids playing in a playground and photoshopped them into an MTR train and then did that, well, that would be wrong. But I mean, both photos were real photos. That is not fake news. Right. And it was quite striking, and it was quite the similarities.
It was. I saw that front page. That was really quite dramatic.
If the head of the Hong Kong police is going to prosecute you for that as fake news, then that's why we need to ask him on what legal basis, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, the problem now, and that was Michael Chigani's problem. You know, Michael, probably, Dan, you would remember Mike Chigani from the old days.
Vaguely,
Mike
yes.
Chigani.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he's given up because of the red lines shows we just don't know where the red lines are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In my
Okay.
experience in mainland China is like that. You kind of work in a gray area and you have a lot of latitude, and then one day you cross a red line, but you don't know where it is. For some reason, you write the wrong thing or you say the wrong thing at the wrong moment. And that's where we are in Hong Kong. And I think the problem here is that where in China the red lines are pretty well established, the paint on them is fresh in Hong Kong. Right. So
all right. Well, Eric, I want to thank you very much for taking time off so early in the morning for you to just kind of bring us up to date. Because like I said, we could practically do a full hour on any one of these things we talked about. But there's a whole rest of the world that's where, that we got to talk about with press freedom too. So thank you very much. I hope we can call on you again, maybe in a little while again, and get another update from you.
Well, there's probably a whole new pile of things next week. So anytime you like. Okay, Dan.
Okay,
thanks for your
interest.
interest.
Okay, take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.